Hello, hello. Great to have everybody on now. We have what? May 30th, our 30th November session. Every month, the 30th of the month, that's why I call it the 30th monthly Q&A session. And you guys can ask an open forum. You can ask any questions you want about anything related to the afterlife, and I'll give you my perspective on it. Just a reminder, I've done. You should, if you haven't checked out my YouTube channel, you should subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you go to I think 6 or 7 playlists there. So the different videos, is about 150 videos there. They're organized somewhat. And if you go to the interviews playlist, you'll see all the interviews that have been. And I've been in some recent interviews. One of them I think has 60,000 views, and the other one has about 20,000 views. Just two of the. I think I've done a half a dozen or 6 or 8 so far about my new book. Promotion, my new book. And my point is that if you look at some of the comments, some of the folks, they're looking for proof of stuff, right? There is no proof. When people use the phrase proof of heaven, like Eben Alexander, I know him, I've talked with him many times. We've talked at conferences, separately, spoken at conferences, but in the lobby, we'll chat over. His publisher came up with the title, and it's a great title, obviously, because everybody's wanting proof. So everybody's going to buy the book because they want proof of heaven. Well, there is no proof. Everybody has experiences, and they're genuine experiences. We all have experiences in life. Prove to me that you actually went to Trader Joe's, and at 1:53 p.m. you were actually standing in front of the raw cashews, and you were picking up a package of raw cashews. Can you prove that definitively? Well, sort of you can, because there could be cameras and there could be time, date, stamped stuff, and yeah. So what I call that is reliable evidence. That's reliable evidence. And then there's other less reliable evidence, like somebody overheard my daughter saying that her dad was at Trader Joe's buying the raw cashews, in whatever today is, Tuesday afternoon or something, that's not so reliable, right? But if you were actually physically there with me, and you actually looked at your watch at the time and you saw that it was 1:53 p.m., that's probably even more reliable. That's why we have court systems, and that's why there's things called circumstantial evidence, and there's more reliable evidence, and something called direct evidence, where there's a direct witness, etc. It's no different with spiritual stuff, right? There's no absolute proof of stuff in the same way there's an absolute proof of a mathematical theorem that somebody can prove, where there is a right and a wrong answer to the theorem. Okay? That's kind of as absolute as you can get. Otherwise, you have to look at reliable evidence and so forth. And that's kind of how I discuss these past life stuff in my new book. You'll see there's a couple of chapters on there, there's at least one chapter. I'm the author, so, I should know this. But I think, there's definitely one chapter where I go through these gradations of evidence and so forth, because nobody can prove absolutely that I say who I say I was. So you'll see some comments, and some of it just made me think of it because of these comments. Somebody say, well, how can you prove that? No. You weren't listening carefully in the interview to that person. So just a couple of things I wanted to put on this recording, that I'm traveling to speak about any of my material, whether it's this book or my second book or my first book or whatever, to different places around the world now. So if you have an interest and you want to set up a time for me to speak, feel free. A library or free venue, or it's a open-minded church. I don't get into religious stuff, but you'll see if you haven't read this book, I do get into stuff that some people consider religious. I talk about my experiences with Jesus and so forth. So a lot of people are going to consider that religious, even though I don't. But again, I'm available to speak at different places. I'm speaking in West Asheville, North Carolina at the West Asheville Library on June 20th at 6:30 p.m. And I gave the librarian options. I said, well, I could speak about this, this, or this. And she wants me to speak about this. She wants me to speak about my second book with the 67 collection of 67 essays. So we'll see which topic she wants me to speak on that she thinks will be useful for, or, beneficial for her local audience. But I'm very flexible. Or I could talk about meditation in general and so forth and so on. So just to planting that seed out there in people's minds. I know Ted is looking into something in the Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas area for me to speak down there, etc. So I'm going to open up the questions. I have some that some people have sent me, so we'll cover those eventually. But Sharon has her hand raised. So Sharon, why don't you go?
No, it's just a quick comment on what you just brought up, and I'm just driving here, and oh, whoops. And I was thinking maybe perhaps to define or to have a definitive to the spiritual would actually put a limit to the limitless. So that's kind of just what came to me. I could be wrong.
No, that's a great way of saying it. It's a great, I think it's a great maxim almost to what you just said. So you can put that down. I won't steal that one from you, Sharon. You can put that down in your social media somewhere. I know Sharon's always teasing me that I steal her stuff. So no, seriously, putting a limit on the limitless. It really is, I think, a great way of putting it, because again, we cannot experience the limitless. We don't know what the limitless can be experienced as, because it is limitless, right? Hold on, hold that thought. I gotta get my power cord. I forgot to bring it over. Forgot to bring my power cord over closer to me here. We don't know what limitless is. That's the whole point. That's why it's called limitless. We don't know what eternity is, because you can't experience eternity. People talk about experiencing eternity.
Unlike your laptop.
What's that?
Unlike the laptop, which is running out of juice.
Yeah, exactly. Like the laptop is not limitless. It runs out of juice. So
but going back to that, energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
Yes, thank you. So back to that first, it's the thermodynamics, right? First law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed, what Sharon just reminded us of. Well, that means that energy exists, has always existed, and it has never not existed, and it will always continue to exist. Now, can we experience ourselves in different individual ways and manifest ourselves and manifest other things? And like I manifested this book. Can we manifest things? Yes, we can create things. Can we manifest our thoughts and emotions? Yes. And those are they're limited, meaning they are identifiable, they are definable, and so forth. But that which is creating that, which is, I think, our individual souls, it's my experience anyway, our individual souls is limitless, to use Sharon's phrase. It's limitless, it's eternal. It's limitless in its potential. I think that our soul is eternal. I don't think it extends forever. I think we are identifiable. That's what I mean. Okay. So, I think we have existed and always existed in some energy form, however you want to define that energy form. I just call it soul. Sometimes I call it in some of my classes, I've called it the like it's like the essential me, but it's a me. It's not that I'm part of cosmic soup. You could say that we are all connected, and I think that is true. I think we are all connected, but that does not mean that we are all the same. That, I think, is an important distinction to make, where some people don't make that distinction and they just say we're all connected, so we're all the same. No, we're all connected and we're not all the same. I think that's the accurate way of describing it. We have many, many aspects that are the same, and we have many aspects that are similar, but not all aspects are the same. That's what I call cosmic soup, where there's no identifiable distinction or individuality. So yeah, this notion of that Sharon, maximed for us. Is that a verb? I just made up a verb. So that's great point. Thank you for that. Questions, open up to questions. And if you don't have anything, I can kickstart with some other people's questions, but go ahead. You guys open, this is for you guys. Yeah. Open forum, flexible, no structure. Anybody got any questions? All right, let me kickstart it with something here. So this is from Jody. So Jody sent he's working, he couldn't be here with us. And I meant to answer this, I think, last session, and I forgot to. So I printed it out so I wouldn't forget. And so this actually works perfectly since I got my new book out now on my past life memories. My past life memories going back 6,000 years, right? Oh, by the way, obviously this is the paperback. There's an ebook out that's since come out. So there's an ebook version, and I'm going to do an audio book when I come back to town. I'm going out of town to North Carolina and South Carolina the month of June. But when I come back in July, I'm going to go over to my buddy's studio, Steve, and I'm going to now I'm going to narrate the audiobook. Okay. For those of you who've been asking me about an audiobook version. So Jody's question: what happens to all our past life experiences? Most of us don't remember them. So what happens to the lessons learned through the trials and tribulations of our other lives? Do they get absorbed by our higher selves? What is our higher self? So he's got a bunch of different questions in here. So we'll take them one by one. So what happens to all our past life experiences? Our past life experiences still exist somewhere in our consciousness. And for most people, they're buried because you don't remember them, right? But do they still exist somewhere in your consciousness? Yeah. So can you uncover them? Yes. Do you need to uncover them in order to be fully developed as a soul? No, you don't have to recover your past life memories. But if you do, I suggest, as I discuss in my book, to use them to inform you more about who you are now in the continual present, so that you can live, in my case, as Kelvin Chin in a more effective, more contented, happier way. Okay. That's how I suggest that we look at past life memories, or any memories. And those of you who don't remember past life memories, look at this lifetime. What do you remember from this lifetime that you can learn? I suggest that people look at our lives that way. Now, many of you already do, but a lot of people don't. They're just bumbling through, and they're just, they're like the, what's it called? Somebody was reminding me yesterday about The Who, that Tommy the Who, the rock opera, Tommy by The Who, back in this, whenever it came out, 1970 or something. It's like Pinball Wizard. People are like pinballs. They're like pinballs bouncing around in a pinball machine, living their life that way. Instead, how about being a little bit more concerted and pay attention and learn from our life lessons? Because life is full of lessons. You guys know this. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but this is something that I think a lot of people would benefit from, paying attention to their past in this lifetime. Forget about past lives. But yeah, the past life experiences are all there. most of us don't remember them, you know, in it's true. We don't, most people don't. So they are, you know, does he say, he said, did they get absorbed by our higher selves? What is our higher self? I used to use that phrase, higher self. I used to use that phrase back in the 70s and 80s, in the late 70s when I started having, you know, kind of more spiritualish experiences. And in the 80s and maybe in the 90s, I even used it, this phrase, higher self. But when I started opening myself up to the other side, and those of you who've taken my Afterlife series, I talk all about that. In 1986, when I spontaneously started opening to the other side, I started questioning who I was. I had an identity crisis in a spiritual way. I was wondering who I was. Was I making this stuff up, communicating with the other side? How much of this is my imagination, and so forth and so on, until I got, as I said earlier, more reliable kind of external evidence that seemed to point in the direction that it wasn't me just making the stuff up. You know, I started getting external, reliable experiences. Okay. I went through this identity crisis, and in terms of this use of the word that Jody was using, higher self, I started thinking, you know, how much of this is from me, what I considered the little me at the time, versus my bigger me, the higher self me. And then there's that gradation, but there's also the what's not me, the beings who claim to be communicating with me. Maybe I wasn't fantasizing that. Maybe I wasn't my higher self talking to me. Maybe it was actually external stuff. And then I started having external corroboration of this from people I didn't even know telling me stuff. Like one of the things I did was I was at a people called it channeling. I used that phrase for about a month, and then I changed it to just spiritual counseling. I don't like the idea of channeling. That sounds like you're getting taken over or something, because I could always turn it off at any time. It's like, oh, leave me alone. You know, I need my space. Don't talk to me right now. But I was at one of these channeling sessions with this small group of people, and I had started getting information that felt and was content-wise different from other beings who were communicating with me from the other side. I started getting stuff from this guy, Kurt Leland. Kurt Leland is the 21st century name of the guy. Kurt, who was a channel, and he did it professionally. He's a psychic. That's what he did, and maybe still does for a living. I lost touch with him 25 years ago. But, you know, about 35 years ago, I was in one of his sessions, and previous to that, it seemed like I was getting information from his entity, Charles. And then I'm sitting there, and then I'm starting getting stuff from Charles, and he's sitting in front of the group, channeling Charles to the group. And I'm saying, Charles to start giving me stuff. And so I started saying, like, I don't know, but, you know, that's it. And I started sharing stuff. And then Kurt saying, oh yeah, Charles just told me that, you know, he was telling Kelvin this, whatever. Anyway, so I start, you know, you could say that he's just making that up too. You know, like I said, there's no absolute proof to this stuff. It's not like a mathematical theorem where there's a right and a wrong answer. But more likely than not, it was like, why would it be in Kurt's self-interest to say that somebody in his audience is getting information from him? It kind of neuters his power base in a sense, right? It's like taking business away from him. Why would he say that? He has a self-interest financially and professionally and ego-wise to not acknowledge what I was saying, but he did. Anyway, that kind of stuff, I went through this identity crisis. Then I started having stuff like that and a whole bunch of other examples like that. So I started realizing, and then I could start being able to discern what was me and what was not me. What was my Kelvin Chin, regular everyday mind? What was my higher self coming from my higher self? And what was not even coming from my higher self, it was coming from outside. Those were the gradations that I went through. I just simplified a year and a half of soul searching for you in the last 3-4 minutes. But it was very difficult, you know, for me to parse, because I'm a very analytical person. Some have criticized me as being overly analytical, but that's the way my mind is. And I had to figure that out. And I went through this very rational way of what's reliable, what's not reliable evidence, and so forth, and until I felt comfortable. So now where I'm at, many decades later, is I don't view myself as high. I don't think of a higher self. I don't have a higher self. I mean, you could say I do, but I don't look at, I look at myself as fluid. I am completely connected with everything. Not completely. I don't think we ever are completely, right? That's the whole perfection idea. But I am much more so than I was 35 years ago when this started happening, more connected with what I used to call my higher self. That's probably the accurate way of saying it. Okay. So I don't use the term anymore. It's not that I think it's a false term. I don't see myself in that way. I don't not see myself. I don't experience myself. Because I don't experience myself in that way anymore, I don't perceive myself in that way. So that's Jody. There you go. Jody, who will listen to the recording because he's at work. I hope that helps answer the question. But yeah, you could still view yourself as having a higher self. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay. I just told you how I went through that myself. Okay. But where I ended up. But, you know, where you end up may be different from me. We're all unique. And I tell you my story only to tell you my story. I don't tell you my story to say this is the way it should be for you. Okay. Ted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of answered the question that I want to ask you
Go ahead.
already, but let's see if I can rephrase this a little bit.
Sure.
You know, there are many people who have had various types of NDEs, near-death experiences, and there are few like yourself who.
Oh, you wouldn't know
have,
about that, Ted.
yes, I would.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I know. So, I did something wrong. So anyway, there would. I did something wrong. Can you still see me?
Yeah. We nothing has changed, Ted.
Oh, okay. I'm changing stuff here though.
You're
Okay,
good.
there would be now there are a few who like yourself who have been able to say, well, these are my experiences of my previous lives. Now, you did say that maybe because people are so busy with other things, not looking at their life today and et cetera, to be able to, at least have some kind of guide or measurement of okay, well, maybe this is what happened or not happened, have been real for me or not. However, why do you think that, do you think that today, more in this century, more people may be becoming more aware of past life experiences and become more aware of past life experiences and maybe be able to share them more than there is a lot of information on the NDEs, you know that. However, there's not as many people who say, hey, I remember this life and this happened and that happened, etc. And I also know that there's probably many people who would like to experience it. I told you about my experience, I think last week.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And you
what do you think about it? Where do you think we might be heading? Now, or do you think we may be heading toward that direction more in across the world or in society? I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. I think the short answer is yes, that more people are. I don't know if more people are remembering. I think more people are hearing about other people like you and me and some others here, Sharon and so forth, who do have memories of other lifetimes. I think more people are hearing it because of the social media. We got TVs, we got radios and televisions that we didn't have before 1940 or 1950. When did the TV come out? Something around there, late 40s, right. The TV, and even when I was in high school, a lot of or junior high school, when I was in elementary school and high school, some of my classmates still didn't have TVs, in the 60s, right? So they couldn't afford a TV. So you know, everybody's got TVs now. We got TVs, forget about it. They got smartphones, you know. I mean, homeless people have smartphones, seriously, you know, it's considered a must-have. So I think that technology mushroom, it just in the last even 50, 60 years worldwide. And then you got cell towers all over the place. You know, I had a friend of mine was, you know, his company was, they went and put cell towers down in mountainous areas in South America where you could never put cables in. There's no way you could get cables in, right? Or towers, or, I mean, they would just put cell tower, a single cell tower that would then connect to a satellite. And so all these people in these villages worldwide, now they get access. So I think that's you know, the reason for the short answer of yes, this time of the world, we'll say. Now, whether more people are having more memories, who knows? You know, that's an impossibility. Again, I can't answer that question. But one of the reasons, I'd say the main reason I wrote this book is exactly what you just said, Ted. So thank you for mentioning that. Is my main reason for writing this book is to come out of the closet, right? To come out of the closet, to tell my story, which I've been holding for, since whenever the math is, 1977. All these years I've told my friends, my close friends, don't talk about it. You know, I don't want my family, my wives have known, my kids have known, I have cousins who've known, I have close friends who've known, and I've asked them to just keep it to themselves because I didn't want to go public with it. It's like, I just want to live my life, you know. It's like, like big deal. But I came out and started talking about this to encourage other people to talk about their experiences. It's the same reason I wrote this book. It's the same reason I wrote my Overcoming the Fear of Death book, right? Why? To get people to talk more about death and dying. It's like this 800-pound gorilla or this elephant in the room staying over there. It's huge, you know, however many pounds of elephant, you know, it's like a 5,000-pound animal over there standing. Everybody sees it and everybody goes, oh, death and dying. Well, we're not going to talk about. Maybe it'll go away if we don't think about it. No, same thing with past lives. I wrote this book to encourage people to talk. Now, I'm not saying that you were going to talk about yours, Ted, or whatever, anybody else. I'm just saying I wanted to be a catalyst. That's it. That's it. Whether you believe who I say I was, whether you believe that I was a woman, whether you believe that I was a World War II fighter pilot or a Buddhist monk or wherever anybody else I mentioned who I was in this book, you know, the well-known historical figures, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. I put it out there because these are my experiences and this is how they germinated, gestated, and were birthed and born and, you know, popped up into my awareness. That's it. That's why I wrote it, just to encourage people to be more open to the idea of past lives. And if people have remembered stuff, maybe they'll be more open in sharing it with other people around them. Yeah. Sharon's.
Yeah. Hi, Ted.
Hi, Sharon.
I was just joking with you.
Yeah,
I know.
I know you rose from the dead there, but here's the thing. When I was 19,
there was an inside joke there that people didn't know.
I know.
when I was 19, I had a near-death experience with a very traumatic emergency surgery, and I did meet. I believe I met in a place that I feel looked like heaven, how it's portrayed in movies and everything. And I met my grandfather, and I was actually in a medical coma. And when I woke up after meeting him, I was totally normal, totally fine. Saw my mom, saw my surgeon. Everybody was very, amazed at this spontaneous healing, spontaneous recovery. And I told my mom, and she said, let's not tell anyone else about that, okay, Sharon. And that's kind of where things were, in 1992. That's where things were. I think things on the internet are great and sometimes, but when we can talk about it and normalize it, not like, okay, this person had this person's special. We all have the capacity to have these experiences. Kelvin and I, have this group tonight, Grief and Spirituality, and it talks mostly about people who lost loved ones and the signs or visitations that they get. And even, here we are in 2023, and Kelvin is so, wonderful at saying, that's normal and natural. We have a woman who just said, my husband, comes in my bed at night, and I know it's him. And she said, but are you going to call anyone on me? Are you going to think I'm crazy? Because I'm not crazy. So there's this notion of shame. There's this notion of shame, in regards to these things. And I think that needs to be, the veil of that needs to be lifted. So thanks, for writing the book, having these meetings, and taking these steps to
Yeah.
lifting that.
Yeah, that experience you had. I think you were in a coma for a week or two or something. It was a long time.
It was a week. It was a week.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. Yeah, and your mom, that was what, 30 years ago now. Your mom, she was worried about, people, because, then they pull in the psychiatrist and they start, assessing you, and then it goes into your medical records, that there's and all this stuff, which is really talk about unhealthy,
Sure.
these
And the
experiences.
other piece of that is, sometimes in some past lives, such as your own, Calvin, that, I mean, you could be killed, and that's the fear of some people, that I don't want to come forward because, I know we spoke about this maybe last time, with even, maybe Salem's witch trials or things like this, and just
Right.
having that, who I have this, thing, and, I know I have some kind of healing energy here, but I don't want to talk about it because I have no reason why I don't want to talk about it, but it just feels like I shouldn't because of a fear. And it could also be a fear from a past life that you got killed or tortured,
Well,
or both.
absolutely. I've been both. Exactly. And I think that's a really good point, because you guys listen to the way I teach now, 21st century Kelvin Chin lifetime. I'm big on letting people believe whatever they want to believe. In other words, I'm not here to adamantly I'm not here to persuade people to believe what I believe, like I have been in the past. Thousands of years ago, I learned my lesson that Sharon's talking about. And, am I the same person? Fundamentally, yes. That's what you'll glean from the book, is that there's some certain fundamentals that are the same in my personality. But have I learned how to modulate and change how I express my enthusiasm for certain things? Yeah. I'm not pushing my beliefs on other people. I learned that a long time ago. Well, I started learning it a long time ago. And, I let people be where they are. And if they're curious, they want to know what my perspective is, my approach, my experiences, then I share that. But even we were having an offline, there were several of us having an offline discussion recently, within the last several days, about communicating with people who don't believe the same as we do. And even that part it needs to be done very judiciously and nuanced and carefully, because even if they say, yeah, tell me what you think, and you got to be, if you don't know where they're coming from, you may say something that really more than makes them feel like their toes are stepped on. And then you may have a very, very strong reaction from that that's very negative, that you didn't anticipate. Now, you cannot control everything. You cannot, because free will exists, and how people interpret things, and even as well-minded as your and well-intentioned as you may be in the way you language it and your feelings and so forth, how you're expressing, you can't predict how somebody's going to hear it or take it. But it is something to be mindful of and to be aware of in the way how we express things. Yeah, Tamara.
Yeah, I was just watching an interview with a gentleman who had an NDE. It was really a great one. And he said, yeah, I was telling my pastor at the church, or maybe it's Catholic church, and 45 minutes telling him all about it and everything I had seen, experience. And the guy was like, yeah, definitely come back and share with the congregation. And then I guess like the next day he found out he was like kicked out of the church. And the guy never wanted to hear from him again and was like, get rid of this dude. So I guess, yeah, you be careful who you tell, right? So I had and he was also saying that so many people are having or sharing, and we have more of an ability to share the NDE experiences through YouTube and social media now. And I was curious to know what you felt about, the ascension, right? Like, what do you understand about it? And I mean, I certainly see in our day in life in this time period that so many more of us are curious, meditating, yoga, where, 100 years ago, nobody was really talking about half of this stuff. So, what do you know about the ascension? What does it
What do you
mean?
mean? Define what you mean, Tamara. What do you mean?
Sure. So like the earth is spinning faster now because the axis is slightly changed. So I understand that the world is becoming more and more tumultuous, and I'm sure that's subjective. And more people are becoming spiritually minded. Light workers are here to raise the energy of the planet. To what end, I don't know, but something, that's my understanding. So that the people, like all the lies and things are going to be uncovered. And you see that in a lot of politics. That's as far as my understanding of the ascension goes. I don't know too much more about it. But would you say there's a reason for more of us being able to speak freely about NDEs, about more of us being curious and open-minded to this?
And I think the reason is what I stated earlier with Ted. I think the communication abilities is, and I don't mean telepathic. I mean the actual physical communication abilities are much more. Our technology is so much more advanced, and so literally you can have a cell phone in the middle of the jungle, and again, maybe you can't, I don't know. If there's a cell tower, in nearby, if you're kind of the cell tower and the jungle's right next to you, whatever, you could, you get access, even on some mountains now where you wouldn't normally, so that I think is the biggest factor. And sure, does that affect the consciousness in the worldwide? Not that there's one consciousness. The consciousness says of all the individuals, of the 8 billion of us worldwide, yes, it does positively affect it. So I think there's a reality to that. I would modulate some of the what I've heard. I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but I've heard people talk about, that the planetary shift, and it's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You talk to different groups and they have different numbers, because whatever, it's their belief system. And I think they forget that free will still exists in the universe, not just on planet Earth, but universe everywhere. It doesn't matter what planet you're living on. And, I've lived on other planets before. So it's like, there's free will. That means you cannot control everybody. And that means that they're still going to do crazy, dumb stuff if they want to. Even if you think that it's unethical, it's illegal, it's cruel, etc., people are going to still do that because they have the ability to, they have the free will, the choice to do it. Until they understand that it's not in their self-interest to do that. So that's why I teach what I teach, is try I'm a seed planter is the way I look at myself. I'm planting seeds out there. Okay, seeds, and you guys are more seeds. I'm planting seeds in your mind, and you have a conversation with somebody over here, that, I would never have a conversation with, never meet, and so forth. And you're planting another seed there about how we can understand, for example, cruelty, and how cruelty does not serve us really. It serves us short term because it makes us feel really good short term. If we're feeling weak and we bully somebody, we feel stronger. But then the understanding needs to eventually trickle down to the bully that, oh, you're just creating a universe around yourself of sycophants and really weak people. And it's incredibly, because you have to keep making them feel weaker for you to feel stronger because you feel so weak inside. That's a long-term educational process. I don't see a narcissist or a cruel person who has that as part of their wiring, because it's worked for them probably for thousands of years, maybe thousands of lifetimes. It's worked, and they know how to manipulate really, really well. Okay, but I'm planting seeds because the ones who are not as cruel, who are more on the fringe of being cruel, the fringe cruel people, will be more open to seeing that, oh yeah, you're right. I did create a bunch of 10 people around me now who are just incredibly weak, and now they're really annoying me because they're so weak, and I can't make them feel any weaker than I already have. So because they're all in the trash can because of me. Now the fringe people, the fringe cruel people who are not as cruel, we'll start to see that, and then maybe they'll trickle down. But my point of saying that, Tamara, is that's a long-term project. That's not changing the world overnight. And so I take a long-term view on these things. Why? Because first of all, I think it's the reality that I've observed over the last 6,000 years, because this is not my first rodeo trying to help humanity, okay? I've been trying to do this, a little emotional, try to do this for thousands of years, sometimes more effective, sometimes less effective. And, and so I've seen how it's a creeping more than a vaulting, and I get it. I don't want to hammer the point too hard because I don't want to discourage people, because my thing is to encourage people to be light workers, to use your phrase, to get out there and help people understand, and to shine more light on positive stuff. So I encourage people to do that. But the problem that I've experienced over the thousands of years is that I've had moments of depression when I didn't see what I was doing really working. And Jesus experienced that himself, which is why we think, some of us think, that he went to the miracles, and he was getting depressed. He was getting very upset. And we're just talking during a 3-4 year period when he was out there teaching, So if it can happen to Jesus, it can happen to anybody. And so don't feel badly if you've gone through a similar kind of depression. You're doing this, and you're doing this, and you're doing this, and you're still seeing these authoritarian, these dictators getting re-elected for another 10 years. He's going on 30 years in Turkey, right? In Turkey, those of you who haven't followed international news, he's going into his 30th. I don't know if it's 30 years, but he's into his third decade of a dictatorship. Okay, why does that happen? And this was in a runoff election. Like the people voted. It wasn't like somebody made him. He took over through a military coup or something. The people voted. So what does that tell you about human consciousness? There's a long way to go. That's what it tells me. But keep doing what you're doing. Don't get discouraged by it, like I'd have in my past, right? Free will exists, and free will is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Even those people's free will to re-elect, what's his name? I can't remember how to pronounce his name. Whatever. It's like it starts with ERD. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. The dictator in Turkey. who claims
Do you
he's
recognize people from other lives? Like, oh, when I was Marcus Aurelius, that was so-and-so. Do you recognize other people from, in this lifetime of other lifetimes?
sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Paul's going to stay far away from me. I think Paul, if he's incarnated right now, I think the people who they know him as, Paul, Paul from Tarsus, where he was born in what present day, I think, Turkey. But Paul from Tarsus, people refer to him as Saint Paul. I think he's going to stay far away from me. But if I run into Saladin, I think we'd probably be friends again. Yeah. But I have friends who, I know who William Marshall was, if you know remember that story from my book about I was Richard, and I was on my steed riding really fast ahead of my soldiers to try to catch up with. I was fighting my father. There was all these intra-family battles throughout Europe that was going on, not just our family, but all these families were all warring with each other. And then William Marshall, who was working for my father at the time, turns around, Lance coming right at me, and I stupidly, there's this part of me that has done this in the past that I have learned from, and this is one of the many things I've learned that was a stupid thing of me that I've learned not to do, is I was so impetuous, I jumped on my horse without any chainmail, no armor, no, not even a sword, no weapon, to lead my knights who did have weapons and were armored to go fight. But I was always the first one into battle, which is a good thing, because as long as you're protected, it builds incredible loyalty with your troops. But doing that in this case was really stupid, because William Marshall turned around, and now I'm at the head of all of my knights. I'm ahead of them, and I have no protection in front of me or on me. And William Marshall easily could have killed me, easily. Instead, I screamed to him. I said something like, "Don't do it," or whatever, some variation of that, with God thrown in there. And then Lance went into my horse, and I went flying. He killed my horse, and he said, "No." I said, "I'm not going to kill you. Let somebody else kill you," something like that. And then within less than a year, within months of that, my father died, and I became king, and I forgave William Marshall, and he became my right hand, and I know who he is today. Yeah. So.
Are you gonna out him?
No, I don't out anybody. And I've told him, he knows if he ever wants to say who he is, it's up to him. But yeah, he's remembered a couple of them, different lifetimes. That one I was with him, another one I was not. Yeah, I think he's got 2 or 3 he remembers, something like that. But yeah. Oh no, there's another. Oh wow, another one just came up for him. Yeah, a well-known character, a much more well-known character than William Marshall even, came up for him recently. Yeah, and our friend George corroborated it. So anyway, George has, those of you who know my friend George, he did the same thing with me, and he doesn't tell people. He'll get a hit, and then he lets them bring it up, and then he mentions, yeah, you know what, blah 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 blah. So yeah, good question. Okay, Sharon, we'll see you next time. You can catch the recording, the rest of the recording. Other questions? I have something that I want to bring up, but I want to get all your questions first.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. So this is Natalie. So
Hey, Natalie.
So I've been having these, upon awakening, when I wake up, I've been seeing these kinds of I know it sounds strange, but these people are looking at me, and it's for like maybe about 10 seconds, And then when I blink, they're gone. And I don't know what that is.
And is this when you're did you say waking up, Natalie? Is that what you said? You're waking up?
Yeah, I'm waking up.
Okay.
I open my eyes
Okay.
and someone's standing and looking down at me.
Okay.
And I don't recognize these folks. I noticed their clothes
Yeah.
seem to be from another period.
Okay.
And I'm not crazy, but
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know what that is. It's been going on now for several months. So I was just wondering, have you ever had that happen to you, or maybe someone else may have had that? I was just trying to understand what that's all about. You know?
Yeah. The short answer is yes. Anybody else want to? I'll comment on this, but anybody else want to say anything? Has anybody else had experience like this, similar? Yeah, I have. So
Okay.
it's yeah, I know you're not crazy. So and I've had crazier experiences than that, if you want to talk about crazy experiences. So no, that's it. Could what is it? It's hard to say. If they looked like they had regular clothes on. Yes.
Yes,
All right. So if they had regular clothes on,
but from another period of time.
but from another period of time. So
Yeah, I can tell they're not like current, like recent clothes like we wear. It looks like it's something from another time, maybe the 1930s or 1940s or something like that.
yeah,
I'm just guessing, but it appears that way.
yeah. So my question would be, does it feel like to you, or are there any, what I refer to these things, what I'm kind of grasping at right now is data points. Are there any data points, like what you see or what you felt or what you heard or anything? If there any of the senses are going on, they may not be, but are there any data points that you can point to that indicate that these are external to you? In other words, that it's not an internal mental experience that you're having, like a memory. Because I've had plenty of them that are memories, and then I've had them where I can tell through various data points, I call them, that they are external to me. You see the difference? That's what I was going through.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you have a sense or not a sense?
I don't. The only thing I can say is that I don't know. And when I'm looking at them, I'm looking to see, first of all, I don't know who they are. And then the second thing is I'm looking at them. I'm looking at their clothes. One particular gentleman looked like a fisherman, for instance. He had something on that kind of reminded me of a fisherman. I don't know how, but that's just what I thought. And then another guy was standing there with a cane. And I saw a lady. So I'm trying to like figure out, why am I seeing them, and what is it, you know? And I look at their dress, their clothing. It's very colorful. I can see it.
Yeah.
But that's about it. This
So you
is
see
something
this,
new to me. So.
And it lasts for how long?
I'd say maybe 10 seconds. When I blink again, they're gone.
So about 10 seconds they're there. So that's a good chunk of time. So 10 seconds.
Maybe less than that. Maybe it could be a
1,000.
little less than that, but around that, it's seconds. But it's enough for me to see something, and then it's out, gone. So
maybe 2 or 3 seconds. 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 or 3 seconds. 2 or 3 seconds, and then they disappear, and they're not communicating with you. At least not obviously. They're not communicating with you.
Not obviously, right? But I see them like looking like, and perhaps that's something I could look at. You know, whether or not I can communicate with them. You know,
exactly. That would be my next step. I would say, see if you can communicate with. Or and then if you find that you cannot, and it's more likely, again, there's no absolutes here. We're just kind of trying to figure things out. But but it could be from your memory, and you could have a very powerful memory, because I've had experiences like that I talk about in the book where, I mean, I can see things. I can see things. I can see swords. I can
Yes.
I can feel the weight of my sword, not the weight, but I can feel the effect on my musculature, my shoulder carriage, and my deltoids, and my traps,
Wow.
and my
Mhm.
pectoral muscles, and my, everything, my whole upper arm, everything of wielding the sword, and I can feel it hitting something and going through, it's kind of gross, but through body parts. I mean, I could
Yeah.
feel that. So,
Mhm.
that's a memory. I'm not doing it in 21st century or 20th century Earth, right? That's an old memory. So it's possible. We don't know in your situation. I would say the next step would see if you can communicate with them. If you communicate with them, then it's more likely that they're external to you. But it could be a very powerful memory. And you may not recognize them now, but you may not even have recognized them in the past. I've had many experiences of past life stuff in my current Kelvin Chin lifetime, of people I did not really know in the past, except I have visions of them in the present. Does that make sense?
Mm.
In other words,
Yes.
it's just they left an impression in my mind, even though I really didn't even know them then. But the impression is still in my mind of them, of what they look like back then. That's possible too. So the fact that I say that to you because the fact that you don't recognize who they are doesn't necessarily mean that it's not real and it's not really connected to you, even if you don't know them. Like I've had experience. I didn't put this one in my book. I just forgot about it. But I had an experience walking through Albertsons supermarket in Las Vegas, Nevada, when I used to live there in the 1990s. And I was checking out, I don't know, I was getting peanut butter and bread and, I don't know what, getting something, apple juice, I don't know what. And I was checking out in the line, and I had this knowingness that I knew that girl. She's like 18, 19, 17 years old. She's working at Albertsons. She's a cashier, some young girl.
Mhm.
But I didn't know her. I just recognized her from having walked through a Turkish bazaar. I don't know when, in the 800s, the 900s, I don't know when, a long time ago. I recognized her from that. And that was the extent of my interaction with her, in Las Vegas at the as a cashier. It was like, how long did that last? 5 minutes, maybe, and I never seen her again. But I recognized her from this other lifetime where I had about the same level of interaction with her. You see?
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though you don't, I use that as an example because even though you don't recognize those people, the clothing and this and that, and something, it could be related to you in an odd way, even though you don't recognize those specific people.
Thank
Like,
you.
I don't know who this girl is, but somehow I just knew where she was from, and that I had seen her for a split second or like a minute or two in another lifetime, a long time ago. It was just a very weird experience. Okay.
Thank you, Kel.
Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions? Tom, do you have a question? Are you waving your hand? No. Okay. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Siggy, yeah.
Yeah. Hi. I just want to assume that when a soul comes to Earth, that the intention for everybody that comes to Earth is good. Basically, a soul is an entity that comes from the the universe or the God thing. And what is your opinion of why we have so much cruelty? Why do people with power do so much damage to other people and have done throughout history when they are basically a soul that comes with maybe a different purpose to Earth, and then these chaos this chaos, appears.
Yeah, it's a really good question. First of all, my experience is not that souls come in pure, that every baby is pure, that there's this notion that's very, it's a romanticized notion that all babies are pure. They are purer than later in their lives, but it's still relative. So they are pure. You'd use it in a relative sense. They're not absolutely pure, clean slate. Everybody comes in with a slate of stuff that's from the past. That's the whole notion of past lives leaving impressions. And that was kind of Jody's question that he asked me, that he emailed me before the session, right? That I answered earlier. We all have this stuff. What we do with it, though, that's kind of what you're getting at, which is, what do we do with our stuff that we all are born with? Do we go the route of being cruel? Is kind of the summary, word of the way I would describe what you're saying.
Yeah. Yes.
Cruel and hurtful person, or can we learn from those experiences and take a different path? And people will, there's a lot of forks in the road, as you're going down the road of life. And there's a lot of different ways you could go and choices we can make every day, not just, once or twice in our lifetime, but there's millions of forks in the road in one lifetime. And people will sometimes choose to be cruel. Why will they choose to be cruel? My summary statement of that is that people will choose to be cruel when they're feeling weak inside at that moment. And I've done it I'm not a cruel person, but have I acted cruelly at times in my life? Yeah. Ask one of my freshman year girlfriends at Dartmouth when I was undergrad, and I was an ass to her, quite frankly. Tom's laughing because Tom and I went to Dartmouth together. I was an ass to her, and I was and I broke up with her in what I felt really badly about how I did it. It was hurtful, in my self-assessment. Did I learn from it? Yes. And then I apologized to her later, about 3 years later. Yeah, I did, in my senior year. But I use it as an example because I'm not immune to it. Well, nobody's perfect, okay? But can we learn from these experiences? And unfortunately, what some cruel people learn is that it works, and they become more cruel. Because what works for them is, in my case, it made me feel better very short term, but then I felt badly. Okay, so I learned from that feeling badly. The problem with a lot of people who you see who are more and more cruel is what they learn from it is an incorrect learning in a weird way. It's very short term. It's correct, but short term. Long term, incorrect. Because as I said earlier, what they learn is, I feel better from bullying somebody. If I'm hurtful but I feel better all of a sudden. And so, but then if they don't take care of themselves and make themselves feel more secure, which is what I did by learning to meditate shortly after that, then they go right back to I don't know if there's a phrase, you're in Iceland, but in the US we have this phrase, they go back to the well. They go back to the well where the water is, and they go right back to the same well because that well provided them with the water they needed when they were thirsty, and they go back to the same well. And what's the well for the cruel person is to make somebody else feel bad, feel lousy, because, I feel better again. And then I make 3 people feel badly. I feel really good. And I'll make a whole country feel like Hucka, and I feel amazing because I am on top of the world and I control everybody in the country, right? And so that's what the cruel person incorrectly teaches themselves, but correctly teaches themselves short term, but incorrectly long term, because now you're going to create a world around you of all these people who are afraid. And that's how you become happy. You know, that's why I said that's a long-term learning project for cruel
Okay.
people,
Yeah.
right?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question. And that's why I have empathy for cruel people, and I have no patience for them at the same time. I can have both, right? I can have both. I have empathy. I understand why they're cruel, and I have zero patience for them. It's like, get off your butt and start learning, dude. It's like, you know, there's this part of me that read my book. You know, there's a sword wielder part of me that, you know, I jokingly, my friends who know me, they say jokingly, you know, don't take your sword out again. And I'm not going to take my sword out and literally cut people to pieces like I used to do, but verbally I can. And so I have to verbally be careful. You know, I learned that when I was a child this lifetime. I hurt some people's feelings and I didn't know that I could do it so easily. And I can still do it easily and sometimes unknowingly. So I have to be careful of that, because that's being hurtful, right? That's being cruel. And it makes me feel good short term. Okay, great. You know, so everybody, we all have seeds of this in us. We need to be patient. And so that's a lesson for everybody, really. Nobody's immune to being cruel. You know, you can point your finger at the narcissist, and yes, the narcissist and the really bad deed doer. Yeah, I get it. But we all have to do this every once in a while too. Yeah. Check ourselves out, right? But it's a really good question. Other questions? Other questions? Think about some other questions. I'm going to bring something up here. Yeah, Ted had to go to the airport. Yeah. I wanted to bring this up because it actually fits right with what Siggy was just asking about, in the context of free will. And everybody has free will. People have free will to do bad things too. That's why, to me, education is the long-term solution. Because you know, yeah, we can force people, and I'm not saying not to put people in prison. I'm not an anti-prison person. I'm an anti-prison person if you're just putting them in there to have cheap slave labor, because there's that going on in the U.S. I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but in the U.S. that's a problem, because they don't get minimum wage, and there's a lot of like, at least Victoria's Secrets was one of the fortune companies, and the Gap was another one who use prisoners in the U.S. They pay them $1 an hour instead of minimum wage, so they get this, you know, basically slave labor. So I'm not saying prisons are a great thing, and yes, prisons need reform, especially in the U.S., probably worldwide. That said, prisons are I'm not an anti-prison place. For social reasons, we may need to lock people up because their free will choice may be antithetical to the type of social culture that we want to have in any country that we're living in. Okay, that said, so make sure that's clear. I'm not saying we should not have rules and regulations and prisons and so forth for certain people. But that said, free will exists in the universe. We can't get around that. And the piece of that I want to talk about specifically is something from the 30th November talk that George Hammond gave in 2014. There's a phrase that's very misunderstood in here, that he used, and he used the phrase, "The house always wins." Do you remember that, Joe? The house always wins. You remember that phrase? George used that, and I didn't understand it. And George had to cover a lot of, in George's defense, he had to cover a lot of stuff in that 30th November talk. And he thought he was going to cover it all in 2 hours. And he went 3 hours and didn't cover it all. Okay. So, okay. In George's defense, he didn't have time to explain all the points as thoroughly as he probably would have liked to. So I was confused. What's he talking about? The house always wins in the 30th November talk. Let me explain this. So first understand, what was the context he said it in? The context was in the section, I can't remember exactly where it was in this 3-hour talk, but remember, those of you who haven't seen it, you need to watch the 30th November talk, okay? It was a download from Jesus, Jehovah, John the Baptist, Shankara, who used to be Vyasa in a previous life. Those of you who've studied any Vedic literature, excuse me, with the Vedic tradition, recognize the name Vyasa. Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita. Many of you have heard of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Those beings on the other side have been in a social science experiment up to recently, which they're not doing anymore, but they were for the last 10,000 years trying to help change spirituality in a positive direction on planet Earth. That's the overview of the 30th November talk. You go listen and you'll hear all the details. The part of it that I want to talk about now is this phrase, the house always wins. And Jehovah and Jesus brought this up and wanted George to talk about this notion of prayer, because a lot of people pray to Allah, Jehovah, God, Yahweh, depending on tradition and so forth. The universe, people who are not into organized religion, or maybe they used to be Christian and they're no longer Christian, or Jews, whatever, and they're now spiritually oriented, whatever. They still use the phrase like they pray to source, or they pray to universe, or whatever. So, you know, if they use a synonym for God is the way I look at it. It's the same thing, basically, same concept. This omnipotent being or force in the universe. Okay. It was in the context of that Jesus and Jehovah were reminding us to watch out and be careful when you're praying to any being. And the phrase George used, or they asked George to use this phrase actually, when he got the download from them, Jehovah and Jesus asked them to use this phrase, to remind everybody that the house always wins. And I was like, what? How does that fit in here? I didn't understand that. I listened to the talk 15 times. I don't know, literally. And I still didn't. Like, what are you talking about here? And so here's what it was. We need to understand first that free will exists throughout the universe. We've talked about this today. We've talked about this in other sessions. Free will is what? Personal choice. Every mind in the universe, not just the 8 billion human minds on planet Earth, but the other minds and other planets and whatever, and all the minds on the other side. That's the part that a lot of us forget. All the minds on the other side, in heaven, the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, whatever culture, religion, you know, wording you use, or whatever other planet. Those of you who are maybe listening, tuning into our Zoom call from another planet, picking it up, I don't know, whatever you guys call it on your other planet, that afterlife. Every mind everywhere has free will, has personal choice. That means that no one other being can control any other being. That's what free will means, including no one, including Jehovah or Jesus, cannot control you or all other beings. I think, as an aside, remember what happened 2,000 years ago. Some of you who are listening to this were there. I know who you are. You guys haven't come out yet to say who you are. That's okay. But some of you were there 2,000 years ago when Jesus was crucified. All right? Jehovah didn't plan that out. He didn't have control over all the Sanhedrin priests. He didn't have control over Pontius Pilate. He didn't have control over, what's his name? The wife and was it Salome? Is the daughter? I can't remember the daughter's name, but you guys know what I'm talking about. The story of, when John the Baptist got beheaded, right? By Herod, and Herod's wife was there, and a daughter, and what all this, the whole story. Jehovah, who many people view as God, Allah, Yahweh, does not have control over everything. If otherwise, he would have prevented all that from happening, because that turned completely upset the apple cart of the whole Jehovah, Jesus, John the Baptist project to help spread and teach overcoming the fear of death. Okay, it completely derailed it. He would have controlled Paul from creating this whole myth about Jesus dying on the cross to save everybody for their sins. If Jehovah could have, he would have prevented that from happening. Those are just obvious examples that most of you have read about or heard about, that that happened. You probably believe that happened anyway. I know it happened. I was there. Some of you may have been there. So neither Jehovah nor Jesus can make all things happen. No one is omnipotent. That's the point, okay? So here's where I started to understand what the house always wins phrase meant. So let's say you pray to them and ask them for help. Might they do the best they can to help you? Absolutely, yes. You can pray. There's nothing wrong with prayer. This is not an anti-prayer point that Jehovah and Jesus were making here in 30th November. No. You can pray. You can ask for help. But just understand that whoever you're praying to, them or some other beings or some archangels or whoever, they're going to do the best they can, but they can't control everybody in every mind, okay? So it's not absolutely going to work out all the time the way you want it to. That was their point. But here's the thing. The main point of the phrase, the house always wins, the main point of that phrase that George mentioned in the 30th November talk relates to the following. What if you're praying and you'll accept anything, any help from any being in the universe? You're that desperate. You will help, you'll, it doesn't matter if it's Jehovah, Jesus, you'll take it from anybody. You're that desperate. You don't care. You don't distinguish. Anybody who's listening to your prayers, you'll take help from, okay? If you're that desperate. What their point was, might you be in contact with some other being who may not be as loving and altruistic and is looking out for your best interests as Jehovah and Jesus? Yes, that's what they were warning all of us when they say the house always wins, because the house always wins is a casino term in the gaming industry, the casino, when you're gambling. The house knows the whole deal, and the house always wins when you're gambling, right? That's why the gambling business is mushrooms all the time. They're always winning. They always can fix things because the house knows everything, right? So if Jehovah and Jesus were reminding us that if you're praying to anyone, especially those beings who hold all the cards, you see, that's where this analogy comes. The house always wins. If you're the being you're praying to, you're giving, you're divesting, you're giving up all your power to that being. They hold all the cards now. So they were saying, be careful of who you give all your power to, because essentially you're gambling away your free will. That's the whole thing that George couldn't say, because it took me, 15 minutes to tell you that, right? Does that make sense? Now it made sense to me, right? The house, in this case, the being who is being prayed to is always in the best position to win. They can tell you whatever they want to tell you. They say, oh yeah, you thought that, that wasn't the answer to your prayer, but you're not looking at it the right way. How many times have you heard somebody say that? You're just not looking at it the right way. It's like, see, you looked at it that way, but you actually did win because of this. They're just BSing you, okay? Making you still believe that they are that powerful being that you need to keep praying to. Danger, Will Robinson. You guys remember, some of you old enough to watch Lost in Space from the 1960s and 70s. There's actually a new version on Netflix or Amazon Prime, Lost in Space. Danger, Will Robinson. That's what the robot always used to say to the little kid, Will Robinson. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. This is Danger, Will Robinson message from Jehovah and Jesus. That's the cautionary note. Be careful who you pray to. That's what they're saying, because the house always wins, right? Because in doing so blindly, you inherently, maybe unwittingly, giving away your power to someone or some being who might take advantage of you. Instead, what Jehovah and Jesus are suggesting is that we each turn within, strengthen ourselves from within, so that praying to them simply becomes a way to ask for help and not an act of desperation, where we might mistakenly relinquish our power to others who might be selfish minds, unlike Jehovah and Jesus, who are not selfish. Right? There you go. Questions? Anything before we close up? Anything before we close up? All right.
Hi, Kelvin. I had a question.
Jeremiah, yes.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Jeremiah. This is my first time here.
Cool.
It's very, very cool. Thank you so much for hosting this. Yeah, those were some amazing points right there. Really got my head thinking. But
yeah,
I just have a few written down here. I was wondering, and you kind of touched on this earlier, but I was wondering how people that don't remember past lives as clearly, how they can have access to them clearer, or if this is more of a, you're kind of born with it, or maybe, we have a lot of blockers in us. Another question, are these memories ingrained in the soul, or do they have a spot in the mind as well? Also, is it your belief, or have you experienced that there is an experience in a different dimension after death? Or is it more once we die, we immediately go into a new life on the same dimension?
So I'm going to ask you to ask the last one after I answer the other ones, because I need you to clarify the last one more, what you mean by it, okay?
Okay.
So first of all, how, let me answer the middle one first, because it's the easiest one. Soul or mind, I don't see that any different, okay? I don't see the soul as any different from our mind. To me, as I said, I went through a period where I kind of had these distinctions in my own mind, right, of how I thought about my mind. Now, I don't see any difference. To me, I use the word soul, mind, consciousness, awareness, all synonymously. My mind is fluid. It's not that I don't experience my mind in a segmented way. And including after I die, my mind is not segmented. My mind is experiences. So my mind is the experiencer of all my experiences, and that is my soul, right? That's how I look at soul. Now, it is possible to view soul as that essential me that is even more transcendent, we could say, than my mind, which carries my personality from lifetime to lifetime. So, because it's very difficult to use these terms, because so you could call it that essential me, because the whole notion of a soul being eternal is a theory. Nobody can ever experience or prove it, right? So it just logically makes sense. Okay, back to your first question, which is, what can you do to improve the ability of recovering past lives? One thing, the main thing I think is turning within, is finding a meditation or a turning within process that is as easy and effortless as possible. The easier, the more effortless, the more effective it's going to be. The more controlling, the more focusing on breath, the more controlling the mind or manipulating the mind or clearing the mind of thoughts, the more of those controlling techniques, the less effective they're going to be, because they're going to keep you limited. And obviously, to use Sharon's phrase from early on in the session, where she talked about limitless, the more limitless we can experience our mind as, the more we're going to open ourselves up more. That's what that means, obviously, logically, right? And so the more you open yourself up, the more you're going to open yourself up to potential past life memories. So to me, that's the fastest way of doing it. And of course, eating well, not eating, bad stuff, balancing yourself out, hydrating, exercising, doing all the good stuff that we all, keep our biology as well as our psychology and our energetic system in a more balanced state, right? Because we don't want to forget this. This is a lot of spiritual people forget about this. They sit around in their cave or the equivalent of a cave and they just meditate all day. No, you got to take care of this. You got to take care of this. You got to work this thing out, this machine, this physical biological machine. Work it out, use it. It influences our consciousness. It is not our consciousness, but it influences it for sure. Now, let me finish your first question by saying this also. And then I'm going to ask you to ask your third question again. You don't have to remember your past lives. I said this at the beginning of our session today. You don't have to remember your past lives in order to fully develop as a being, as a human, or as a soul. No, you can look at emotional patterns. If you don't remember past lives, what I suggested you start looking at anyway is your emotional patterns. To answer this other part of your first question, as an adjunct, an addition to for the first part of your first question, is to look at your emotional patterns. That can also help open up your memories to your past lives. Emotional patterns. What makes you tick? What about your personality and your emotional patterns? Why do you like this certain kind of thing? Why are you attracted to this other certain kind of thing? Music or certain kind of, in my case, weaponry from the past. I had recognition memories. I was emotionally connected to them. Mummies. What? Mummies? Why was I attracted to mummies? Emotionally. Why do I feel an emotional need to protect women and children? Where does that come from? Look at emotional patterns. Why am I attracted to certain, people who have these certain attributes? Emotional patterns. What does that say to us about ourselves? That informs us more about who we are. That can help us make more appropriate decisions that are more in alignment with our desires. Well, what does more appropriate decisions that in alignment with our desires do? It creates better behavior and more success in our life. What's that mean? Happiness, contentment. So this all kind of feeds, to me, it all feeds together to creating a happier life, which is me. That's the meaning of life, is to figure out how to be happy. You want to, does that answer your couple of questions, Jeremiah? You want to ask the third one again?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. So the third question is just basically on this topic of other dimensions, or, when we die, do you have any belief, or what is your perspective on, are we just jumped right into another life immediately, or is there, anything else of that nature?
No, my experience is that when we die, and I have memories of being on the other side, and I write about one of them that just came to me literally, and it was January, February. I wrote down the date because I actually wrote down the date. So the date is in my book, where this memory popped into my awareness while I was swimming. I remembered being on the other side. I was like, what? And so, just where did that come from? Who knows? But we are on the other side for as long as we want to be, to answer your question. The short answer is, yes, there's other dimension on we call it the other side, or the afterlife, or heaven, or whatever you want to call it. And you can hang out there as long as you want. You can hang out there for a split second and come right back in. I know stories of children who've done that and incarnated right back into the same family and 9 months later been born again after they died with not tattoos, with scars on them that became birthmarks in their next life, where the kid had a scar right there from falling when they were 3 years old on their bike or the tricycle or something, whatever. And then they're born with a scar, the exact same shape, the exact same location, with the exact same personality of the kid that died 9 months earlier. So you can come in that fast, or you can hang out for hundreds or thousands of years on the other side too. I've done that. I've hung out for hundreds. I'm not sure thousands. I'm not sure because I don't remember everything. You know, I don't remember it. We don't. My memories only go back 6,000 years. Actually, I had another memory that went back, I think, around 6,000 or 8,000 years since I wrote the book. But so I don't know how long in between lifetimes, but the shortest one that I know is between my last lifetime and this one was about 8 years. So yes, there's another dimension. You don't come back right away necessarily, and you don't have to. You choose to come back. Nobody makes you come back. There's no God or gods or panel of judges saying, you got to go back now. Now, you hear these NDEs people say, well, I almost died, and they still told my grandmother or this angel or somebody or God or Jesus told me I had to come back or my dead guru said I had to come back. That's their opinion. Their opinion is that you got to go back and you got to do some other stuff, whatever. But you chose to listen to them. That's your free will. So you chose to come back. So when you hear people say that who have NDEs, yeah, they told me I had to come back. Yeah, but you listened to them. How many times when you were 2 years old did your parents tell you to do stuff and you didn't listen to them? People forget that, right? Or when you were 12 or 13 years old, you didn't listen to them. That's called free will. Okay. The fact that somebody tells you to do something doesn't mean you don't have free will. You still always have free will not to listen to people. Okay. Ted, did you have one last thing to say? Jeremiah, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Kel.
Yeah, good. Ted.
No, I didn't. But it's interesting. I understand now. I'm going to be leaving in about 20 minutes before 4 o'clock. I understand now that was because didn't understand when he was, George was saying, well, the house holds the house rules, or the house, what do you say? The house always wins.
Always
I
wins.
kept going over that and thinking, what in the heck? Now I know what that means, when you're playing cards, that the house always wins.
Right.
But the understanding that, you can give away your will. You can give away your own free will in doing that. And that's the type of thing when you're in a gambling machine and you give away all those dollars.
Exactly.
You just give it because you want to, you just won $100 or something, then you give that back, the house is going to take it, they hold all the cards. That's very, very interesting. I would encourage everyone who have not listened to the 30th of November to go ahead and really take a look and listen to it.
Yeah.
But that made me forget what I was going to say, actually. Yeah, so about the other side. So you have the choice, because I've heard some NDEs where, say, well, you have to go back, and to me, it's like, I'm overriding it and they say, no, I don't want to. So no, you have to, goodbye. And it's like, okay, we're going to override your will. No matter what you desire or your will or what you want, you're going back, boom. That I think that's interesting. And that's what it seems like. A lot of people have that feeling, okay, I'm in this euphoric atmosphere and God is speaking and God said, go back, and I have no choice. He's just, override everything that I want to do. I don't want to go back in that broken body. No, you're going back again. You're going to hurt again.
Yep. Yeah. You hear people say that in NDEs and it's incorrect. Here's what they miss. The they miss the fact. That's a great example because I'm going to point out the subtlety of where they miss their. They
I
miss,
wouldn't want to go through all that pain,
yep,
9-10 months of
yep,
suffering.
yep.
No.
Where they mistake where their free will is in that, because there's at least two. There's probably 1,000 different points in here, but I'm going to point out two of them where they totally miss it. Their free will. They chose to come back into that body and experience the pain while they're having their NDE. And here's where it is. One potential, we'll call it a flexion point. Okay, it's so subtle that they don't realize it. Is their which is actually goes to this whole the house always wins issue here. They have put so much power in this entity that they view as God. That God said that I got to come back even though I didn't want to, right? You think about the power that most people have of how they view God. If somebody's having an NDE, by definition, when they say, God spoke to me and I was at the feet of God, and they tell this whole experience, whatever, they're by definition, that is the very definition of subservience,
Right,
of them being a slave to, and they are at the feet of what they view the slave owner they're calling God. Now, God doesn't, that's my view, because I don't view God, I don't view Jehovah that way, right? You guys know that. But
right.
most people do. Most people who are religious view God as all-powerful, omnipotent, knows everything, can do anything, and I'm his slave.
Right.
Right? Now, they would not use that language. They wouldn't use that language, but to me, that is the very definition of a blind follower. Okay? Whether it's of God or their guru or who knows, fill in the blank. But let's just use God in this example here, Jehovah. So it doesn't take much for their desire to put them right back in the body, because when the God says, in their mind, they think Jehovah would never tell them this. Okay, Jehovah, they think, first of all, they think that's Jehovah they're talking to because it's a big, powerful being of light.
Right.
That is not Jehovah. I can tell you right now because I know Jehovah's personality, and he would never say that. So first of all, they're mistaken that that's God, but you're never going to convince them of that. Okay, I understand that. They believe that that's God. I'm not going to try to convince them. I'm telling you that is not Jehovah's personality. But okay, they believe that's God, and then they say, and God says to them, in their mind, their God says to them, you got to go back into your body, you're not done. And so the fact that they view that being as God, their desire, that misunderstanding is exactly what I was just talking about. The house always wins. The house knows, in this case, I'm going to call it a fake God because that's what it is. It's not Jehovah. Okay. This fake Jehovah God, we'll call it what it is. This fake Jehovah God is telling this person in their NDE that thou shalt go back into your body because I am telling you to. Right? Jehovah understands what free will is, and that's not free will. So that's why I'm calling this being a fake Jehovah God. And the person doesn't realize that they've given up their free will choice to a being who's telling them to come back, and that is a choice that they made, is to give up.
You know what? Actually, listen, their desire has been changed. Their own desire, what they desired, is now changed. I don't want to go back. Yes, you're going back. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's okay. And I go back. It's like, oh, God told me. And then they come back and they have this whole story that God told me I got to come back. What I'm calling this fake Jehovah God, because it's not Jehovah. Jehovah's not going to say that to people. Jehovah recognizes what free will is. That's the thing. Free will means free will. Yeah. And the
Well,
other,
free will means you would give me a choice
yeah, the
at least,
subtle part of this is the
and
desire.
accept my choice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The subtle part is the desire part. Desire is very subtle. And that
Yeah.
desire to worship this being who this person is viewing as God makes them follow. And that's a choice. That's a free will. Tom. You got to unmute yourself, Tom.
How's that?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think you covered it in the book. I'm interested, just as an example.
Yeah.
Do you remember your transition, or why it is you came back from the World War II fighter pilot and into your current Kelvin Chin?
Yeah. I did not talk about it. You're right. I don't talk about it in the book, but yeah, I do remember. I didn't talk about it because the memory is not as clear as some of my other memories. So
Okay.
I wanted to kind of put more my clear stuff, and even the knowingnesses are pretty clear. This one is not as clear, but it's more. I do talk about feelings in there, so I guess I could have put it in there. I didn't, but it's more of a feeling that I have that that I know that George and I wanted to get together again, and there was a feeling with Jehovah and Jesus in them for me to come back in now too. Actually, the feeling that I got was not between the World War II lifetime and this one. It was actually before my World War II lifetime.
Okay.
When I was on the other side, and I do talk about that when I was swimming and so forth, and what I saw Russia and Germany, which is
Okay.
that whole experience, that they would probably blow up again, go at each other again. The World War I was not the war to end all wars. I had
Yeah.
that experience on the other side, but in the mix of that experience was a conversation. We'll just call it a conversation amongst Jehovah and Jesus and in the core group in me, that, well, wait a minute, but George is going to come down, and then they were planning this other stuff for the 1950s to happen, and I said something like, I'm not going to last. I don't think I'm going to last. I think if a war, I think I'm 99% sure a war is going to happen, and I was 99% sure when I came in 1918 that a second war was going to happen, and I was going to get killed. So I was 99%. And so I said, yeah, I don't think so. Don't worry about it. That was that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't between, it was before.
Okay.
Before that one. Yeah.
Okay. And then, but coming in your current Kelvin Chin form,
Yeah.
you two didn't meet. You and George didn't meet for, I guess that it's probably a blink of an eye or something. You didn't meet.
Yeah, we didn't meet for 20 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I've never said this publicly, Tom, but since you and I both went to Dartmouth together, there's a group of Dartmouth people.
Yeah.
A whole bunch around our time from 1967 to 1978 or so, I think, who were with Maharishi when he was with John the Baptist, and some of us were with Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
We call it, we jokingly call it the Dartmouth Mafia, but it's like this little group.
All right. I'm really looking forward to going over that.
And that's not to say that there aren't similar groups at
No.
UCLA or Berkeley or whatever, but there's a group that I know of. I know who they are. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to talking about that for sure.
Yeah, we'll get when I come visit you next week, we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, I gotta run. I gotta get to my massage. We've gone over a little bit, but great session. We'll see you guys in a month. It's June 30th. We'll do it again. Any questions, just bring them. If you cannot attend, shoot me an email or Facebook message me or whatever, like Jody did, and I'll I'll print it out and I'll answer your question, you know, in a month, et cetera. These are free, they're open to the public, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same Zoom link going forward now, but I messed up 3 or 4 sessions ago, and I forgot to re-up the Zoom link. So it's the same Zoom link for, you know, going forward,
Okay.
but except not the one I used for the first 3 or 4 sessions. So
Okay.
I hope that's not confusing to people, but you know, if you haven't registered, if you're listening to this and you haven't re-registered again in the last couple of sessions, you'll have to re-register to get the new link.
Okay.
Because I send this recording out to everybody there's like 150 people or something I send this out to now, or maybe it's 250 people now who've registered, who are not always live with us. Okay.
Okay.
Good. All right,
All
guys.
right. Carry on. Bye,
Care.
Sig. Bye, Joe. Carry on.
To see everybody.
you.